Miyamoto Musashi's The Book of Five Rings is a book that displays an in-depth understanding of strategy and practical philosophy. The brevity and concision of the text are simply amazing. If you are unaware of Miyamoto Musashi, he was a swordsman in 16th century Japan and the victor of over 60 duels that were most likely to the death before he reached the age of 30. Afterwards, he dedicated his life to pursuing the way, the path of strategy. It was then that he wrote the Book of Five Rings, where each ring is meant to portray a different aspect of strategy. The book that we're going to be studying today is the fifth and final book, the Book of Void, a mysterious text that writes of the nature of nothingness and its place in our strategy and in our mindset. This book is only one page long, but it is packed with densely written philosophical concepts and strategy advice. The very first line of the Book of Void is a statement that leaves much to be analyzed. Musashi begins by telling us, "What is called the spirit of the void is where there is nothing." Now, I know this may seem quite vague, but it actually contains a very deep concept. What truly is nothingness? To find out, let's go back nearly 2 millennia and halfway across the world where one of the greatest philosophical texts that deals with the concept of nothingness was written. The Sophist by Plato. In The Sophist, Plato introduces us to an Iliadic stranger who lectures Socrates and a man named Theaetetos on sophistry and the various illogical fallacies and rhetoric that the sophists used in order to take advantage of less skilled thinkers. One of the fallacies most commonly used by the sophists dealt with the concept of nothingness, or non-being, by exploiting the preconceived binary nature that they believed existed. Now, in order to explain how and why the perception of nothingness was incorrect, the stranger moves on to provide a definition of being. He states, "Being, or existence, is a state in which one acts or can be acted upon, physically or metaphorically. An idea can have existence as an idea, despite not physically existing. Therefore, an entity can be classified as a being, even though it's simply a conceptual form." Now, prior to Plato, Parmenides and other pre-Socratic philosophers claimed that beings were usually separated in pairs, one being the opposite of the other, like cold and warm, rest and work, male and female, and so forth. Within these pairs, there always existed a third characteristic that either unites or defines the two. For example, cold and hot would be temperatures, rest and work would be activities, and so forth. That being said, what would be the opposite of being? Would it be nothingness? If one were to say that nothingness is the exact opposite of existence, then they'd run into a contradiction. If nothingness is the opposite of existence, and nothingness as a concept exists, then nothingness is what it's supposed to be the opposite of. So how can this be possible? Well, the mysterious white stranger would come to answer. He states that one's negative does not always signify its opposite. If something is not hot, would that mean that it's necessarily cold? Not really. It can be of any temperature that's simply not hot. As he states, "Then when we are told that the negative signifies the opposite, we shall not admit it. We shall only admit that the particle not indicates something different from the word to which it's prefixed, or rather from the things denoted by the words that follow the negative, for it signifies not the opposite of being, but only the other of being, and nothing more." In other words, negative does not always signify direct opposition. It simply implies differentiation. Therefore, if one can define a being, its counterpart, and their characterization, we can also define and understand their fourth state, their absence. This is what Miyamoto Musashi is going to come to tell us next. He states, "By knowing things that exist, you can know that which does not exist. That is the void." What one would fail to understand is not by definition the void. One must have a full understanding of a subject in order to understand its absence. As Musashi mentions, the true void is not bewilderment. With your spirit settled, accumulate practice day by day and hour by hour. Polish the twofold spirit, heart, and mind, and sharpen the twofold gaze, perception, and sight. When your spirit is not in the least clouded, when the clouds of bewilderment clear away, there is the true void. So the void is something that will come to you instinctually when you've already learned the being of your subject. So his advice? Enact strategy broadly, correctly, and openly. Then you're going to come to think of things in a wide sense, and taking the void as the way, you will see the way as void. If you understand the void as we've defined it, you will use it to enact strategy in your craft. But the more you practice strategy in your craft, the more you realize that it can be used in any topic, any craft, any art. In other words, the way itself becomes the void, because the execution of these crafts becomes so instinctual, it's like doing nothing. Musashi moves on to confirm these concepts in the line that encompasses the entire Book of Void. He states that in the void is virtue and no evil. Wisdom has existence, principle has existence, the way has existence, spirit is nothingness. So there are different ways to interpret this line. You see the words wisdom, the way, principles, they're all states of existence, but the actual words here might differ, understandably due to translation. Without knowing Japanese, just conceptually based upon everything else we've read, synonyms to principles, like for example ideas or theories, seem to fit better here, because what we have in this quote is a pair and their characterization. So the first element that he mentions is wisdom, which can also mean something like knowledge or facts. Therefore, the word that would pair with wisdom as its opposite would be something in the lines of hypothesis, for example, as it complements wisdom and is a precursor to it. Now, merging these two, principles and wisdom, will result in the way, or strategy, which is a characterization of the aforementioned pair. But let's look at the other important part of the sentence. Spirit is nothingness. The word spirit within the entire Book of Five Rings doesn't exactly translate to spirit as we'd normally perceive it in the West. It doesn't mean the human soul or ghost. It's a bit more realistic. Spirit is used as a way of saying intention, behavior, or resolve. It's how one carries themselves, their demeanor, and their mood. So what does it mean to express nothingness in your behavior and have it show in your demeanor or your mood? It is not apathy, idleness, bewilderment, or fear, but rather it is having pure control over your emotional state, your mental state, your behavior, and your demeanor, and have it show in any practice that you pursue. In order to accomplish this, the natural progression is beginning from postulation, moving on to wisdom, to the instinctual assimilation of the void, and then, of course, the ultimate goal, strategy. That is why in the void is virtue and no evil, because to reach this state, you need to search, understand, and realize a path so well that you cannot be bothered by the futility of evil and other things that would inhibit the cause and steer you off the way. To summarize, the void is not the unknown. It's the launch pad which propels us to begin searching for the truth. It's actually finding and seeing the truth. It's practicing the truth, but also the goal we must set, which is a perfect understanding of the subject or art form. In other words, the return home. Now, is that it? Is the void the final goal, or is there something beyond? Aristotle did go a step further, as he reflected on what he parallels to the void, the concept of infinity. But we're going to come back to that in a future episode, so do stay tuned. Now, both the Book of Void as well as Plato's Sophist are profoundly enlightening and are rightfully placed as some of the greatest works on existential and practical philosophy. Two books I recommend for anyone to read, regardless of age or profession. And one last thing to observe is the beauty in the fact that two completely different cultures from different timelines and eras would come to complement each other's philosophical thoughts so well. On that note, thanks so much for tuning in, and please stay tuned as more episodes are soon to come. Till next time.